Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership.
Welcome to episode 274 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, we're going to look at the topic of whether you should adapt to the people around you or be your authentic self. Now, sometimes this is a tricky thing to decide because we don't want to bend over backwards and change the way we are, change our personality all the time, but sometimes we need to adapt to what's going on. So I'm going to tackle this topic in this episode right now. So it can be very hard for thoughtful leaders to be themselves in the workplace, particularly if being yourself means being quiet, introspective, and thoughtful in an environment full of outgoing people. So what do? Do you tone yourself down, or do you turn yourself up to suit other people, or do you just try to be yourself? In this episode, I'm going to take a look at the benefits and drawbacks of being your authentic self, as well as when to consider changing your style to suit the people around you. So let's start off with the benefits. Okay, it's obvious that being authentic is a lot easier when you can just be yourself. You don't need to think hard about how you are behaving because it's natural and quite instinctive. Now, if you're in a team or workplace where you feel you need to act as somebody else, it becomes tiring pretty quickly. And Dr. Brian Little talks about this in his TED Talk, which is called Who Are You Really? And I'll put a link to that in the show notes page, which for this episode will be thoughtfulleader.com/274. Now, there's a lot of hype around the concept of authentic leadership as well. An authentic leader is someone who shows integrity and acts based on their principles. Now, being authentic makes it easier to build trust because you're not playing a part or acting, you're just being yourself. People get to know and understand the real you and how you operate, which means you can ideally work better together. And there's a related post that I recommend you reading about introverted versus extroverted leaders and who wins. I'll put that in the show notes page as well. So are there drawbacks to being yourself? Well, we are all unique snowflakes and we're all very special and all those good things. But unfortunately, we all have aspects to our personalities that aren't well suited to every situation or every person we need to deal with. To be your natural self all the time is aspirational and a nice idea, but sometimes it's beneficial to adapt your style to suit the situation. So I'm an introvert, and when I deliver training, I have to be quite extroverted for that day. Now, this is tiring, but it works better than being very quiet when I'm trying to help people learn something. Now, when I deal with a busy senior stakeholder, I try to get straight to the point. My normal style is not to be so direct, but I find it works better to adapt my approach in that particular situation. Now, we all have personality traits that are great in some situations and not so great in others, and the trick is to know when to flex your style and when to bring your natural self. Now, one thing to note here is that your personality is not an excuse. I've come across a few leaders in my time who say things like, well, I'm this sort of personality, which is why I do this thing. Now, unfortunately, personality is not an excuse for our behavior. We can control our behavior when we put our mind to it and when we have a degree of self-awareness of how our behavior is impacting other people. Now, this is good news because it means we can be adaptable. We can flex our behavior and therefore our style to different situations in ways that will help us to lead more effectively. Now, psychometric or personality testing tools are quite common in the workplace these days. Many teams use them in an effort to understand themselves and each other so they can work better together. But one thing I've noticed is that using these tools, we often speak about how we should adjust our approach to get the best out of other people. In other words, how do we adapt our style to suit the other person? Now, one thing to be cautious of here is falling into the trap of always trying to accommodate someone else's preferences. That is, bending over backwards to make sure other people are happy. Now, ideally, what should be happening is that both parties meet in the middle. They both adjust to better suit the other style so that neither party needs to adjust too far. Now, it's worth remembering that if we constantly change our style to suit others when they have no consideration for our own preferences, we could be setting a precedent that we are a pushover and we're always willing to accommodate what they want. So, when should you be yourself and when should you adjust your approach? Well, sometimes adjusting your approach helps you to get a better outcome. So the question is, when should we adapt and when should we continue to show up in our natural style? So here's some ideas to help you decide. The first thing to think about is, what are your personal projects? Now, a concept that I find useful when making a decision on whether I should adapt my style is whether doing so will help me to further one of my own personal projects. Now, a personal project doesn't need to be work-related. It simply means something that is important for you that you want to improve or develop over time. Now, this concept was introduced in Brian Little's video, which I spoke about previously, and that's in the show notes page. For some people, this might be doing research, building a business, or achieving career goals, and for others, it might be taking care of their family. Now, if your career and reputation are important to you, then you may decide to speak up and put yourself out there when it comes to career opportunities, even though this is not something you would normally do. Or you might decide to give a presentation, even though you might be a shy and reserved person, because you're passionate about spreading the word about what you're working on. And I just want to note here as well, one of the best tools for deciding when to adapt and reflecting on your experiences is my Useful Thinking Journal. Now, you can get this journal in paper form or electronic form. And as a listener to this particular podcast, I'm going to give you 20% discount. All you have to do is when you check out, use the coupon code TL Podcast, all one word, all capitals. That coupon code again for 20% off the journal, TL Podcast, all one word, all capitals. Okay, let's get back to the episode. So the second time you might choose to adapt is when you're dealing with important stakeholders. Now, many of us are faced with important stakeholders who we need to gain approvals or help us build momentum for an important project or initiative. Now, the main problem here is that important stakeholders often have power. When someone else has greater power, you're more likely to need to adjust to meet their preferences. It's easier to build rapport with someone who is like you, and how do we seem more like another person? Well, one of the ways is we emulate their style. This might mean we perhaps communicate more directly or become more sociable or focus on analytical details more than we normally would. But of course, your approach will depend on the person you're speaking to. Now, when we're trying to build rapport, it can be beneficial to be similar to the other person rather than to stand out and be distinctive. Now, a friend recommended a potential coaching client to me once, so I'd set up an introductory chat to see what some of his challenges were. Now, he told me that he felt like he should be further along in his career and he knew he could achieve very senior roles, but he just wasn't getting the opportunity. He felt as if he was being overlooked at every turn. Now, without any prompting from me, this person told me about his background in the military and how it was one of the most significant parts of his life, and he went into some detail about his previous military experience, even though it seemingly had very little to do with our conversation. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with being in the military, but what I noticed was that he was leading with this information because he thought it made him stand out as a more capable person than other people, and he obviously took a lot of pride in it. Now, I thought to myself, if he's telling me this, he's probably talking about it a lot at work too, and you know what? Many of the people in his particular field wouldn't necessarily have had military experience, so they may not really resonate with his background. So actually what he might have been doing is actually making himself seem very different than the people around him, rather than making an effort to find some common ground. Sometimes standing out is a good thing, but at other times it can work against you. Now, another situation where you might choose to adapt your style is when you're trying to build trust with team members. Now, even though you might be the boss, you might need to adjust your style when dealing with your team. I find this is often useful when dealing with team members who are lacking in confidence or when they simply have a very different personal style. Now, if you're leading a team of technical specialists who love the details, being a big picture person can have the effect of making you seem out of touch. If one of your team members is low in confidence, then you may find softening your approach and being less demanding or direct can be a useful approach to help them gain confidence and start to open up. Now, we don't want to get into the situation where we need to walk on eggshells, being afraid of what we say and how we say it all the time. And after all, this can be stressful and tiring too. But we do need to acknowledge that to get the best out of the people around us, we sometimes need to speak on their level using an approach that aligns with their way of thinking. Now, I find that being open about yourself can be a helpful starting point. Now, there are many people that dismiss these personality and psychometric tools as pseudoscience and nonsense, but I find that they actually resonate with a lot of people and they give us a nice starting point to try to describe our personal style to someone else. So you might consider using a tool like these to communicate your own style to the important people around you. Now, I personally like the print assessment, and I'll put the link to my print page in the show notes. But there's also a free one at 16personalities.com that you can try as well, which gives you a decent report, and you just have to enter your email and it's free. Now, the real benefit here is that there are few surprises. If you are a direct communicator, then people will have that expectation. But that doesn't mean you can be direct all the time, but people are likely to be more understanding if you slip into that mode from time to time. Now, essentially, you set expectations about how you generally work, which can help others adjust to it. Likewise, if you learn more about others, you can adjust to suit them too. Now, just to wrap up here, sometimes I hear people say things like, well, I don't care what other people think, and they use that as an excuse to be themselves. But the workplace is run by people, and you need to work with and collaborate with them from time to time. So sometimes it can be a good idea to adapt your approach instead. And I'm interested in your comments on this. Do you find it hard to be yourself in your leadership role? Let me and all the Thoughtful Leaders know on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/274. And don't forget about that coupon code for 20% off the Useful Thinking Journal. That coupon code again is TL Podcast, all one word, all capitals, and you'll get 20% off at checkout. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you can spare a few seconds of your time to leave a positive review on your podcast app of choice, I'd really appreciate it. It helps me to spread the word of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Okay, keep up the thoughtful leadership, and I'll be back next time.